All right, we're joined next by Congressman Ro Khanna. He's a Democrat from California who represents Silicon Valley, and we're glad to have him here on the first inaugural episode of Counterpoints. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Congratulations. I'm excited about the show.
Yeah, and so actually, I'm curious, what kind of media consumption goes on among your colleagues in Congress, both Democrats and Republicans? Like, where are they getting their information? Is it curated for them by staff, and if it's their names in it, they're seeing it? What are they personally scrolling?
Well, certainly most members get anything that's written or said about them from staff. But then I think it's generational. I mean, there are some of the members who've been here a while who still read the New York Times, the Washington Post, may read their hometown paper every day. Then there are others of us who may scroll through our Twitter feed, scroll through social media, go to different websites to get a sense of what's going on, and of course check independent media as well.
It's a good question. I'm always curious about that, because the idea of Donald Trump sitting in the Oval Office scrolling through his Twitter mentions, it was just such a remarkable image, but almost certainly a real one. Congressman, do you find yourself looking at what people are saying in your Twitter mentions too?
Sure. I mean, not like Donald Trump, not obsessed about it, but the reason is because it gives you a sense of criticism. It gives you a sense of perspectives of those who disagree. And I find it helpful. And sometimes I'll engage to the consternation of people on my team. But I do look at it, maybe in the morning or at night before sleeping.
And I doesn't help you sleep. I want to talk in a minute about the big issue on Capitol Hill right now, which is the fight over a pipeline reform. That is the kind of the side deal that went along with Manchin. But first, I want to talk about something that's lighting up probably your mentions a little bit this morning. We did an earlier segment on the New York Times investigation into congressional stock trading. You were mentioned in that report as not somebody who had done any stock trading yourself, but as somebody whose wife had traded some stocks that were under the jurisdiction of a committee that you served on. I think one of the companies was under investigation or potential investigation at the time. Give us your response to the New York Times article.
Well, as the New York Times reporter said, my wife has assets apart from before we were married, and it's almost like an index fund. It's a trust that's highly diversified, and I think the New York Times reporter said it is like an index fund. So in my view, she doesn't make those trades. She doesn't know about the trades. It's an independent trust that's invested broadly. And I think that's why there's no conflict. Now, I support the Banning Stock Act and will vote for whatever comes to the House. But I think my case is very different.
I was going to, go ahead, Ryan.
Is it a blind trust? I mean, and why not make it a blind trust? And is that what the best law would do, or would the best law, require particular just indexes that members of Congress? What is the solution here?
I think there should be a prohibition on members trading. I think when you have a case like a spouse who's coming in with independent wealth, whose family is tied up with all of this, so it doesn't just affect her, it affects her family, her sisters, others. I think that having an ethics requirement that the person isn't trading themselves, that it's highly diversified, bans any conflicts. But I will vote for whatever, I don't get to write the law. I'll vote for whatever comes there. But I do think that in our case, there is no conflict. And I think, I can't be saying beyond that there shouldn't be conflicts. I don't think I should be telling my wife's family how to restructure their finances, other than to make sure that there is no conflict.
Yeah, I was going to say it's really night and day between your case study and the example of someone like Paul Pelosi. There's a very clear distinction there, and I wanted to get into that a little bit. Just one more question on this topic, because Ryan and I were discussing earlier how the New York Times investigation kind of carved out the Ways and Means Committee by sort of throwing its hands up in the air and saying, well, there's no realistic way to really look into this because the information is so general and so broad that it's very difficult to separate and to disentangle the variables. Who would have known what and how would that have influenced this, and that. As you mentioned, you think a blanket prohibition on members trading is important, and safeguards for spouses are important. And what should diversification, one thing, of course, and blind trust, so something to that extent. What is the risk so that people understand? Somebody who's sitting on Ways and Means, for example, you've been in Congress, you kind of know the sort of information that comes your way, even if there is no investigation, even if you're not on a committee, you probably get information. What is the risk? In other words, why do you support the blanket prohibition in the first place?
Well, I think there's a risk to trust in terms of are people sitting on committees with jurisdiction and then taking into consideration their own stock portfolio. Of course, in my case, I have literally been one of the only voices voting against overspending on defense. I've taken on big pharma. I have taken on big oil. And so the idea that the highly diversified indexed fund of my wife, which she had before marriage, would have any influence on me is refuted by actually my record, and I think there's no conflict. I will say this, though, and I say this supporting a stock ban. The big influence in Congress, in my view, is much more campaign finance. What's actually motivating people's policies is the fear of super PAC funding, is the fear of campaign contributions, is the money coming in from defense contractors, for insurance companies, from big pharma, from special interest lobbies. So I support this. I think it's better to have a stock trading ban than not, but we are kidding ourselves that is really the issue that's going to solve Congress to care about things like Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, free public college, increasing minimum wage. That is the issue of dark money in politics.
Yeah, it just scratches the surface of that problem.
And what I've heard from some members of Congress, and I'm curious if you've heard this as well, is that there's sort of an unspoken arrangement on Capitol Hill now that says that where leadership says, look, we cannot politically vote for an increase in salaries. We will get crushed at the ballot box if we, the 30-second ad writes itself. This person went and voted themselves a raise. But look, and the unspoken deal is, look, you're going to outperform the market because of the access that you have to information. Is that unspoken arrangement kind of widely understood to be the thing that's in place and is what's causing the resistance? Because now it's like, we're not going to get a raise, and also we're going to lose out on this.
No, because I don't think most people beat the market. I haven't looked at my wife's, but I think usually being in an index fund way outperforms the people picking individual stocks. So I don't think that's what it is. I think we should have a vote. I mean, I was an early co-sponsor on the bill. I think there are different cases of complex cases. I mean, in terms of spouses and how that should be handled, or people who have independent careers. Let's say you could say someone is a spouse who has an independent career, but we can resolve those, and there should be a bill, and no bill is going to be perfect. I mean, it's not, but overall we should pass something. But I really don't think, honestly, that it is sort of greed that is holding this back. It may just be that people don't see the urgency of how much of an issue this is with the public.
So on the question of NEPA reform, of pipeline reform, where do you stand on this kind of game of chicken that's going on between progressives and Manchin and House leadership? Should this be broken into a separate bill? And if it's not, would you vote down the CR, the continuing resolution, in order to stop this pipeline reform from going forward?
I would vote it down, and it's not just pipeline reform, it's a gutting of NEPA. I mean, you are basically saying you can't have any community have more claims after 150 days. Well, a lot of times it takes far more than 150 days for a community to figure out the negative impact. You're going to allow the president and the executive branch to permit and help create fossil fuel infrastructure where communities, frontline communities, had already won. We're winning 90%, and now the executive branch is going to get to overrule judicial rulings. So This is not the permitting reform we need. We can have a thoughtful conversation about how we build more clean energy, battery plants, solar and wind in this country. And there may be challenges in terms of the impact on that on endangered species. And then we can discuss what the trade-off is between building green and negative impacts of doing that. And I am for looking at a healthy permitting reform to be able to build green. But I'm not for a permitting reform that's going to allow us to build more fossil fuel infrastructure. This is not the permitting reform we need.
What is your sense of where like-minded people on the House side might stand when it comes to voting against the CR in this case? Do you think that there would be a threat to the point where people have to come to the table? Do you get the sense that others are willing to vote against it?
Well, I know that Bernie Sanders has said he would vote against it. I've said I would vote against it. I think other people have said they prefer a clean CR. I don't know how many people have come on record to say, no, we won't vote for this, but they should, because the challenge is not those who are not going to vote for a CR which is going to gut environmental laws. The challenge is, why aren't we getting a clean CR? That's the problem of shutting down government. So I think we should be very clear that we will vote for a clean CR to keep government open. But if they don't send us a clean CR, that's where the blame lies for shutting down government. And I think we would then get a clean CR.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think that Democratic leadership would shut down the government over this heading into the midterms. Is that your sense? I just can't imagine them doing it.
I can, and I think this is a case where the person who blinks first is the person who's not going to get their way. And look, and Ron, you know this, I've been pretty reasonable in the Progressive Caucus. I'm the one who's worked with Senator Manchin to try to get a deal. I've been the person who said, let's get something done for infrastructure. I've been with CHIPS. I've worked with Republicans and Democrats on that. So I'm not one of a bomb thrower, even though I'm very strongly progressive on Medicare for all and free college and $15 wage. And I'm saying this is the time that we have the leverage, that we should be very clear and bold and say we're not going to vote for it. And if 30, 40 members said that, I just don't think it's going to be part of the deal. And we could say we're open to a thoughtful approach next Congress, but we're not going to be rushed into doing something that isn't going to end up increasing battery production, solar production, wind production, but is going to be increasing fossil fuel infrastructure. This is not the conversation that we need on permitting reform.
I'm really interested to see what happens with this, because I think it is true that progressives have the leverage not to blink. And we'll see if they do it.
We'll see. Congressman Khanna, really appreciate you joining us on this first show.
Well, I appreciate it. Always, I'm looking forward to your show, and I really appreciate your voice.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing, and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.